Hello.
Coach B.
Is this the one and only, the legendary Mayor Tim Keller on the line?
You got it.
Is it one of my former...
dial into the Champions Corner. Spend a little time with you, Coach.
Well, we appreciate...
I'm also hungry. I should have just come in person so I could have some good food at the grill.
Listen, we had a ribeye waiting for you. We still do. We have a ribeye waiting for you. You know.
Oh, man. I didn't know that.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, well, you can have mine, and I'll get one next time I'm
there is no way that I could follow you. There is no way. And so, how you doing, Mr. Mayor?
You know, doing okay. We're in a good place, meaning our city's getting ready to reopen whenever we get permission, and that's good. It's like before a game, I've got the game plan, and our players are ready. So it took us, 7 days or so to get that together, but I feel much better today than I did last week.
Well, that's pretty much awesome. How much has your football background, helped you during this crisis?
I actually lean on football a lot, both, internally and externally. And so, for me, in any time of stress, I'll often harken back to like how I used to prepare for a game. It's just good mental discipline for me, and gives me sort of just guidance in terms of like what to really focus on, and also just to kind of clear out all the noise and so forth. So that's more just a story about what goes on in my head, but more explicitly, we very much operate based on the concept of like playbooks. And so for us, even our annual retreats at the city with our leadership or how we do things, we use football as a common vocabulary, even though not everyone originally knew it. So we use terms like we're calling an audible. We have our playbooks. We say we need to have a revised playbook. We say we need some special plays in this situation, or we got to come up with a prevent defense. So it's the vocabulary for us and actually everyone's kind of bought into it just because it's an easy way to problem solve. We use football vocabulary, and I appreciate even my team who they don't even like football or know anything about it. Now they know all the vocabulary.
Mr. Mayor, it's your favorite broadcast partner at the Gladiators game, Sebastian.
Sebastian, great to be with you again in the box.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a lot of football strategies are this fluid, though. So what kind of challenges does that present where things change literally on the half hour?
Yeah, that is true, and that's where you got to get really into kind of crisis management. And, so for us, here's, what we've been doing basically is we created a long-term team and a short-term team, which in our vocabulary is a fast team and a slow team, which does still come from football. So instead of kind of methodically running the ball down the field, we've got our fast team working on what do we need to do in the next 3 days. And that was especially important when Corona all started. And so we pulled folks from different positions. They might, like the head of our fast team is our director of equity and inclusion, which hardly makes any sense on paper, but she herself happens to have a health background and also is just really good in a crisis. So we put together our fast team to work on what to do in less than 3 days, and then a slow team to think about like long term, what are we doing next quarter, if you will, or at the end of the game. And so they put together like, how do we think about reopening? How do we plan for outbreaks where we've got to staff folks in community centers and in hotels all around town? How do we get enough PPEs if there's an explosion or an outbreak of Corona? So those two teams are really how we've been doing it. So we've been kind of specializing on those fronts. In the short-term team, we literally have tried to do things like understand how to accelerate construction projects, or how to keep our planning department open, or how to keep people safe in parks. We've done those with less than 48 hours turnaround. So it's really credit to the team too. I've also had to really step back and give guidance and then let them run the ball.
Well, I know you've been fixing some roads because the few ventures out of my house I've taken, and there's people out there working on the roads, so I know that's been happening. There was kind of there was kind of a surreal thing this afternoon where Arizona announces, hey, pro sports can come back, and then in the same hour, California announced all the state schools are not going to have students on campus for the fall. I mean, that's literally how quickly things are changing, right?
You know, it is, and I do feel, there's pros and cons to what America is going through in a sense of, one, in a crisis, centralized leadership is important. And in some ways we've had that, and in a lot of ways we haven't. But on the other side of the coin, we've got 50 states all making different calls, like you pointed out. And I think in this situation, you never want to be the first out of the gate. You want to kind of fast follow. And so having California take a stance and having Arizona take a stance, I think is good, so that in a week or so, New Mexico can have an informed stance. I think at this time, you actually want those blockers out in front. You want a fullback there taking a few hits to see what it's like.
How do you lead? And I've studied leadership, Mr. Mayor. And how do you lead in a crisis like this, where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't? If you open it up, is it possible it's too soon? People get sick. If you don't open it up, how many people are going to go out of business and stuff like that? You got both sides screaming. How do you lead in a kind of crisis like that? And the reason why I asked the question is for people who truly understand or want to learn about true leadership.
Well, that's a great question, Coach. And, this is one where even some of your philosophies I do think about in these times. And for me, there's a couple of things. I know internally, I always remind folks we got to have faith in the process. And the way we organize ourselves with, our weekly meetings and the way we encourage directors to make recommendations and then we make decisions, but kind of separating those two aspects. I remind folks, we know our team is good. We got to have faith in our problem-solving process. And for us, that's all about, research, make a recommendation, and then make a decision. And I think for me, to your point about, the sort of big decisions weighing on everyone's mind about how do we balance public health and the economy, we're trying to say that's a false choice in that you got to pay attention to both. So we're essentially, it's difficult, but we're trying to stay in the fairway of public health so that we're keeping people safe. But within those guidelines, how can we make sure people can get a paycheck? And so that's what actually we are rolling out on Thursday. We have our city's reopen plan, and it's all about, how do you conduct your business with social distancing and with screening and understanding contact tracing and quarantining, all of these, intense things, but in the context of being open. And I think that's the direction where we want to go when the state, gives us the go-ahead to do that. But I got to tell you, there's no right answers. I think another thing is I gave up on, no one knows the truth right now, so you got to use your judgment and, make an informed decision, but also not wait on the sidelines. I think the other thing is, I mentioned you don't want to move first, but you also don't want to move last. There's big economic and health consequences. So, you gotta see what's happening with your O-line and then pick a hole and run through it. And that's what we'll continue to do.
I love his analogies,
right?
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't beat an analogy like that. What do you prefer? What seat is hotter? The seat of the number one man running in the city, or the quarterback, man? Like, what seat is hotter? The quarterback in an empty formation with that Mike linebacker coming down the A-gap with no one to block him. What's hotter?
I got to tell you, quarterback is way hotter because as I was reminded when Coach B was kind enough to actually put me in a game, it's just a difference of time, and I think, folks get this, but, you've got max 3 seconds maybe back there. You might buy yourself 5 seconds in the pocket, but I'm grateful every day for even 24 hours to circle up and figure out what to do the next day, because that's something you don't have back in the pocket. But I'd say this, in reality, it matches, of course, the situation. As much as I love sports, being back in the pocket was having to move faster than I ever had to move. But it did make decision-making over on the professional side at the city, I think it put it in good context. You need more time to think about what to do with 700,000 people and how we're handling this. And so that's appropriate. You never want to make those decisions in a matter of seconds. But it also made me grateful. Like when I have a night to sleep on a decision, I cherish it because those have been, now we are making decisions on a 24-hour basis, and I'm glad to have every single one of those hours. So, the stress is different, probably equal, but in different ways. One, you're running for your life, trying to find an open receiver. The other one, you're just trying to make sure that you don't put anyone in harm's way.
Mr. Mayor, forgive me if this question is naive, but two franchises that will be playing right now, they play in a city-owned facility. So, who makes that decision? Is that a Mayor Keller thing, or is that a United and Isotopes decision? Take us through all that. How does that all work out?
I've been talking to the ownership of both teams, and of course, just a reminder for folks, the state runs Tingley, so any events there just go through the state. The city doesn't really have a say. But Isotopes, you're absolutely right. And basically, there's three flavors of ice cream when it comes to who can kind of make a decision in this environment of Corona. So one flavor is if the state makes a ruling, the city can't be less than the state. So if the state says, no gatherings of any kind, the city's just out of luck. You can't have anything in Isotopes Park because it constitutes a gathering. Then there's another flavor where we can always be stricter. So say the state says, all gatherings are available at 50% capacity. Well, we could still say we're going to do 25% capacity, or we're not going to do anything. That's at least we have the authority to do that. And then the third flavor is really about if there's an absence of a ruling, and we've seen this. Like the state didn't really make a ruling on parks, and so I kept parks open but closed the playgrounds. That was a city choice. The state also didn't make a ruling on open space, so we kept open space open but required social distancing. So anyway, those are the three flavors. So right now, nothing can happen at Isotopes Park under state rule. But if the state does open up, we're going to have to figure this out. And I've been in touch with the ownership of the United and the Isotopes. And I think first and foremost, we're waiting on the leagues. So as soon as the leagues make a decision, because they don't even know, say we wanted to have both play right now. Well, the leagues aren't sanctioning their games. So we're going to see what the leagues do, and then we'll make a call here. But I think that's for the best because you need that regional guidance too.
Football analogies and ice cream analogies. Mr. Mayor, one could say you're pandering to these two hosts talking football and ice cream.
I love it. I'm a sucker for analogies, but hey,
you can see, when you watch the live stream, if you are not, share it on your Facebook page or the city's Facebook page, so more people can hear this interesting interview. And we just want people to know that it's true. The camera puts 150 pounds on you, so that's the reason why me and Sebastian look the way we look right now. So.
I love it. Well, we'll share that out and appreciate all the listeners and both of you for your dedication to leadership and to athletics.
Well, during this time now, I know, how big that, that oval-shaped ball is, and when you get when you need a little pressure release, and like when Sebastian needs a little pressure release, he goes to the fridge, and so I know when you need a little pressure release, you throw the ball around, and so. Without sports, man, how much have you, when you're in office and we're not in a pandemic or anything else like that, do you have time to watch sports?
So it's, I am a believer all of us have to have, our mental health and our stress releases. And on my front, I actually have been throwing once a week. It is permitted. I actually wear receiver gloves, which I usually don't wear. and we sanitize, before and after, and we're never even close to 6 feet near each other. So I have been throwing in a couple of parks around town once a week.
What a show off!
So obviously,
I get an hour to do it.
So obviously, you're throwing a ball with Mrs. Mayor. So you're not, close enough to be able to do it. Who do you throw it with? Your security detail?
I get a random, either an old neighborhood friend or a high school friend. Sometimes I'll do it with a detail. We're of course together all the time anyway. So, it's a good workout. But I have been watching, I've been watching this Jordan thing on ESPN. I'm a big Piston fan, which I know I can hear the boos already, but I love the bad boys. So, seeing Jordan brings back a lot of memories in that era. But I've been watching, the NFL channel. I watched the draft. I mean, it was the most boring draft ever, but I still tried to dork out and enjoy it. So other than that, that's about all I got for you in terms of everything else has been work or parenting.
What do you think of
6-year-old?
What do you think of Last Dance, Duke City Gladiators? Chicago Bulls. What do you mean? What do you think of Last Dance, Chicago Bulls?
Well, I was always rooting against them, but once the Pistons weren't that good anymore, I of course always respected them. But it's a great show, and for folks missing sports, it's funny how watching old sports games just doesn't seem to cut it. So I have found, though, like the 30 for 30s and NFL 360 and stuff like that, that's at least been interesting. So, that's been getting me through. And my son and I he's into NASCAR, and like NASCAR's running, so we just wait for a car wreck, and it's the greatest thing ever.
Myself and John Harbaugh, you met Coach when he came into the city within the last year. We talk about Last Dance. We talk about how informative it is. John made a great point saying, hey man, Last Dance answered a few questions for him if they're doing it the right way, if they're going about winning the right way. I told Coach Harbaugh, I said, man, I know about winning, man. I know about winning because a lot of these things that we're seeing during it, hold true. And even Sebastian, who says he's an aficionado on winning, which if he would have said he was an aficionado on bread, I would have believed him, but
championship voice of the Gladiators. Okay, remember that.
That's right. He's got a championship voice. I like that.
He's mentioned, hey, Coach, we've seen a couple parts in there, a couple of sound bites, couple of where it sounded like you, or the philosophy, or for a John Harbaugh, who's a Super Bowl winning coach, the reigning NFL Coach of the Year, to say, hey man, that answers a few questions if we're doing it right. That'll tell you how powerful that show is. And I believe like J.J. Watt believes, 10 episodes ain't enough. It ends this weekend, bro. Then I'm really going into depressed quarantining. Right. What do you think of the show? What stands out for you?
For me, it's been really Michael way more competitive than I ever thought. I mean, everyone's competitive, but like he still remembers every play that he was wronged on and where every player's at. I mean, he's still mad. Like he's still mad at the Pistons.
You ever see anyone hold a grudge like that? I mean, the guy can hold a grudge, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, Coach holds grudges like that.
When he says, do you know anybody that holds a grudge like that, my hand is up now, so you can't see it right now. But, one of the things that I also think it showed is that there are people that are in business, whatever business they're in. They could be in politics,
right.
And don't have a clue what they're doing. Because one of the things that surprised me the most in this show is that obviously the people that were at Converse, when they got the first offer to,
and Adidas.
Well, the first.
Right.
Converse got the first, right. And Converse passed on them. Then Adidas, when Michael Jordan goes, I'm an Adidas guy, man, let's go to Adidas, and somebody at Adidas says no, to him, and they go to an upstart company, which is what they labeled it, Nike, and Nike says, "Hey, man, we want to make three million, out of this deal, and we can." And they make 126 million. I'll tell you what, those people at Converse and Adidas should have been fired. I shouldn't have to be sitting here suffering here in Albuquerque. You know what I'm saying? I should be work because I'd have signed him in a heartbeat. So isn't it amazing, Mr. Mayor, that I'm sure that you can see in a lot of things, because you deal with business, you deal with staff, you deal with everything, people who really aren't qualified to do their jobs.
Well, it is, all the little people who kind of missed how big he was going to be and that kind of thing. It is amazing, even though he was so successful. I mean, people just didn't believe he was ever going to be as good as he was early on. And, credit to the folks who did recognize it and to Nike. But I think we see that a little bit in the city in a sense. We've got local businesses we want to support. We try and put together, whether it's fixing up the rail yards or, some of the big projects that our city's been doing. You want a kind of deal that works for everyone. And, those are just good examples of narrow-mindedness. And I think we all fall in that trap where we don't want to try something new. But when I think about things like Meow Wolf or Electric Playhouse, folks who knows what those are examples of mini Michael Jordans in New Mexico.
Or the United.
That's a great one too, right? People thought, they're like, oh, well, I hope you can average, 5,000 fans or something like that. And they're averaging, 12,000.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's amazing. So what sport are you, now this time of year, it's baseball season, I think we're in the tournament of the NBAs at this time, or is it towards the end of the regular season?
Towards the end.
The postseason of the NHL. The only sport that we really don't have would be the NFL. This would have been tournament time for the XFL. What sport are you missing the most?
It's by far football, and that's just a clear bias only because I know it's not even football season. But, it's just kind of always been the sport that I really stayed current with. But I'll say this. I love the NBA playoffs. I'm one of those guys who doesn't follow the NBA until the playoffs. And then I'm a big NBA fan. And so I love the LeBron storylines and, Golden State. To me, that was a return to form for the NBA. So I was super into the NBA the last few years. And I was really the Bucks I got into. So I was hoping they were going to pull it out. And I have heard, maybe they'll still have this season in August. And so anyway, I have been missing the NBA a lot. Of course, the Final Four. So really just the big dance, March Madness. I mean, that was the beginning of the end of psychological health when that thing was canceled.
I mean, Mr. Mayor, do you anticipate the NBA finishing up? I know that's been kind of a hot button issue. I mean, it seems hard to imagine that season concluding.
You guys have way better, insight than I do. I just kind of listen to a little bit of sports radio, but, I've heard the latest about this idea that they need to finish the season or else they owe a bunch of money on TV contracts, right. And how they might do it all in Orlando. And I mean, I love the idea. You're socially isolating every team. We get to watch it on TV. So, I think at this point, TV plays a more important part in our lives than maybe it did before. And I would love some live sports on TV. And I do actually just want to go full circle to even where we're at, as a city. Look, people need outlets and diversion. And even more in times of crisis. And that's why the analogy to this is, we announced Monday we're going to try and do every summer kids program we can. They're different and they're in a different form. But almost every other city has kind of given up on that because it's hard to do and it costs money. We're saying we need youth sports right now. It's different. There's no tournaments and this kind of thing. But we got to stay active. We got to stay healthy. And we got to remember that side of overall health. And so I think some of that is even psychological on TV.
I know they say one of the things in the Last Dance documentary was that line about winning's hard and leadership is really hard. And
there's a price.
Right, there's a price for those things.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, how many phone calls are you taking just about golf per day?
That's a great one. And I think it is true. It's interesting. I think look, golf. I mean, the state made the first call, so we had to wait for the state to allow us to open up. But I will tell you, hundreds of calls a day about golf. And we were ready when we got the green light from the state, and I think that was important. But I got to tell you, like, I have never, no one cares about golf courses until they're closed, and all of a sudden, all these people come out of the woodwork about how much they love golf, and I'm like, where have you been?
Yeah, did you know we're in Ponte Vedra Beach?
Our city courses are worthless. Now they love them.
Well, I could tell you 2 phone calls you wouldn't get for golf, which is me and Sebastian. They don't make golf clubs that, suit us.
Mayor brings up a great point, though. You read Sports Speak Up, and they're bad mouthing Los Altos or all these other places, and now it doesn't matter what course you're going to. You're just happy to be out.
I don't read Sports Speak Up, so I don't know what they're writing about or anything. So
it's a good thing to avoid.
I would think for me it'd be a pretty bad day to have to read about golf courses, for crying out loud. And so, Mr. Mayor, what is your hopes? I shouldn't say what are your hopes. What is your thought process thinking? We've got a full sports schedule right around the corner. When you talk about, let's say, football, you got Yaffle, you got the high schools, right. You got UNM football,
I-9 Sports,
I-9 Sports with their football program. How do you handle all that when people want to have answers about? Where are we at? How do we, is everything on a holding pattern?
Yeah, and that's, I tell you, it's a good question. And here's basically where we do want to get guidance from all of the respective bodies, meaning like YAFL and AYSO and that kind of thing. And even Little Leagues has really come up because it's sports season now.
Right.
So we believe by the end of May we'll have guidance from all these entities. But what I'm trying to see is we map out everything, and I know this is a little academic, but we map out everything on a grid. And one axis is number of individuals, so that's the volume of players, and then the contact intensity. And this is where it is unfortunate for sports. If you look at soccer, there's actually a lot of proximate close contact. And so it's tough to play a soccer game and, not have this kind of spread. Conversely, baseball, if you just eliminate steals and, home plate confrontations, you're almost never near each other anyway. So we are advocating for, modified sports in ways that can keep us all safe. That's what the city's trying to do. But some sports are tough. Like, we gave up on water polo. There's just really no way to do it. And so we've canceled that through July. But that said, can you still practice? Can teams still practice in certain ways? We're hoping to enable that. But we want to make sure, in respect to experts, I am not an expert in public health. So that's why we're letting the leagues make the first call, and then we'll take it from there.
Mr. Mayor, a quick comment, if you could, on the New Mexico games are taking a toll as well. And I know Fred Holtberg puts a lot of work into those. This might be his last year as director. A lot of those events have been canceled. If you could speak to that.
This is one where, similarly, we also are trying to, where we can, postpone things. So I'd love to see if we could do a different New Mexico games, later on in the year. But that is an elderly population, at least if it's senior games. So that's problematic. But the New Mexico games, maybe we just do some smaller events where it's for example, I tried to learn how to throw the javelin a couple of months ago. So I got to practice javelin, and shockingly, it was way harder than I thought.
Well, when you use the word try, we kind of got the picture. When you use the try, just like in football, Mr. Mayor, you got plan A, plan B, plan C. You always have to prepare for the unknown. You always have to prepare for the what ifs, all those different things. With what we're going through now, they're starting to talk about a second wave of it. Where does that fit in with the planning. How does that put just so much more pressure on you and your amazing staff?
Well, luckily we are in partnership with the state, and so and the reason why this matters a lot is because the key for the rebound or the relapse second phase, it's all about our hospitals not being overwhelmed. So you have to forecast, the number of beds, the number of ventilators, number of ICUs, and then our testing capacity. And this is where, and the state really leads in this front in the sense that we distribute resources and track, but they're the ones fighting for more PPE and more ventilators and things like this. So our state has done a great job elevating our capacity. And what that means is we're going to be able to survive, a relapse that is, bigger than before. So the key issue is as long as your healthcare system has capacity, then you use quarantining and contact tracing. But if you run out of beds in the state, you got to close everything down again. And that's what happened to New York. So that's why we're doing so much to be prepared. And right now, relatively speaking to other states, New Mexico is in the top 10 on almost every statistic. I think an unfortunate challenge obviously has been Indian country. So that's kind of a separate but related problem, because we now in Albuquerque are proudly taking about half the folks from the Northwest. They're here in Albuquerque, and we step up time and time again in Albuquerque for the state, and we want to continue to do that. But we need those resources. So
and I can't tell
about the second phase. It's all about capacity.
And I can't tell you, as a Native American, how proud I am that my city, Albuquerque, has taken on that responsibility. There's, I know there was a little bit of skepticism about it, but, thank you, Albuquerque, for taking that responsibility for our neighbors to the west.
I appreciate that, Coach. And I actually went out to To'Hajiilee the other day. We've been sending 8,000 pounds of food that Burqueños gave. So it's been a city government effort, but also a public effort. I always tell people, I have not heard a single complaint. In fact, I've heard nothing but support for our initiatives, and I want to thank everyone here for that, too.
Mr. Mayor, I know we're kind of taking you all over the place with some of these questions, but you've been so good in informing us. A couple of hours before we went on the air, the California system schools all announced no students on campus during the fall. What goes into a huge decision like that? Let's say that UNM has that on their mind, on their plate. Is the mayor's office even involved in a decision like that? Is that made at the state level? Is that a solely university decision? Maybe shed some light on that.
Sure. Well, and that's one where I think you got to kind of know your position on the team. So, for example, on a decision like that, a mayor usually has some input. We might be like a role player, if you will. We're coming in on third down kind of thing. So we have some input, and then we've got to make sure that we communicate with the public, and then we also set up the related services, whether it's like childcare or transportation. So in a situation like if our universities aren't going to open, we've got to modify childcare and transportation in the other direction because the students won't be there. So that said, we're not, a major decision maker on a question like that. And, I think California, it's interesting. I do think universities are in a better place for distance learning. So I can understand where they're coming from just because the kids are older, they have technology, etc. I think it gets much harder the younger the kids are. And also, when you get to, 14 and below, when kids can't be home alone, you've got a workforce problem, and this is what we've been looking at. You can't send kids in you can't send people back to work in Albuquerque without having all the summer programs and childcare available. No one will show up to work because their kids are still at home because school's out. So we do have to understand, there's a workforce challenge once you get to younger kids. And I think that's where it gets really hard. I actually think the university decision is not nearly as hard as the high school, and not nearly as hard. When you get to elementary and grade school and pre-K, you're literally, the economy and schools are tied together.
Could you imagine, though, in your youthful innocence, not strolling past that Golden Dome at Notre Dame and having to distance learn?
Oh man. I mean, it'd be
or having to watch
right?
the game on direct.
I'm sure I would literally be hitting the refresh button on the webcam of the dome to remember that, like, I went there, which I still occasionally do.
Did you? What was the experience that you had out in South Bend when the Lobo faithful were out there?
Oh, Coach, I was thinking about that today, and really it's because our reunion is coming up, my college reunion, and of course it was canceled, and so I was so grateful for that experience, because for me, it really brought together two things. When I was at Notre Dame's a very isolated place. I mean, I do love it, but I will say, it's in the middle of South Bend, Indiana, and believe it or not, it's a lot different than Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when I went there, it's when I first began to really appreciate my state, my city, and I also appreciated how different my background was than a lot of people who were there. And I for a long time, had issues with Notre Dame. Whether it was some of their policies on certain political and social issues, or it was a fairly conservative education. And I think I finally reconciled this. For me, it was the most healing trip ever, because I was proud of my state. I was with Lobos, with New Mexico. And conversely, I was proud of my university. Every New Mexican out there had a great time. They loved and appreciated Notre Dame's welcoming and inclusive spirit, which is something that's not always talked about. And even the fans, I got with former counselor, bless his heart, he passed away, Ken Sanchez, and we got the Irish cheering for the Lobos by the fourth quarter. And that last touchdown, our whole section was cheering for the Lobos. And I teared my eye multiple times on that trip. Last quick story, being on the field for the March Out of the Irish. Even as a student, you're in the student section, there is nothing like being on the sidelines when the Irish run out on the field. I'll never forget that. And I had my parents with me. So also my dad went there, and so it's a memory I'll have for the rest of my life.
With the tradition of the Irish, the tradition, of we can name 2 or 3 different, inspirational movies when it deals with the tradition of the Irish. Did that, experience that you went through, and then the experience of saying Rudy, because by the way, I know Rudy Rudiker, and
nice.
do those experiences help you when you made the decision, I think I want to become mayor of the city of Albuquerque?
Well, I appreciate it, and I gotta let you know, I could talk to you guys for another 30 minutes. I do gotta sign off in a couple. But, I've made it a point at tough times in my life to try and reflect on other aspects in my life. And so at times I do go back a little bit to that experience. And I know at Notre Dame it was interesting because you do it's all about Kool-Aid. You're just indoctrinated into this whole ethos and mythos and everything. And there was a small era when I kind of even rebelled against it. But I think what you learn is, one, never give up hope. Miracles can happen, and magic is out there, no matter what you want to call it. Faith is out there. And so I remember to really believe not only in myself, but in others. And also just have faith in what I believe in. So that very much is tied to something I kept from Notre Dame, and some of those great stories that I think you can use to lift yourself up during tough times. And I love that you know Rudy, by the way. I never got to meet him, but they show you that movie on the quad, which so for all 10,000 students, they show it to you on the quad on your first day of school at night. Everyone goes there and watches Rudy. It's great.
The most inspirational thing about Rudy was I've seen him speak publicly, and you literally, when you watch him speak publicly, say to yourself, if he can do that, so can I. Because other than his story, there was nothing really special about him.
Now, Mr. Mayor, did I sense a short pause when you were saying my reunion, a short pause where you would normally put the year, but you didn't want to share that? I sensed a short pause.
They never really had a name for it, but it was year 2000.
Okay.
So it was something cool. I know that, but it wasn't a millennium. I don't know what.
You are a young mayor, boy. 2000.
The gray hair is coming in fast, so I like hearing that I'm still young for sure.
Last question, Mr. Mayor, because I know you got to go. It was a listener sent it in. Who's the mayor's least favorite sports personality here in town, and why is it Sebastian?
Oh man,
Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us.
I gotta say this though.
Okay.
When I was a kid, like a lot of sports, people like sports, I used to sit there and do the commentary for Duke's games. Like, I mean, how ridiculous is that? And so
I did that all the time.
I have a soft spot for Sebastian because in some life I always wanted to do sports commentary, and so I got a lot of respect actually for both of you. So I'm in your corner, Sebastian.
That's good to hear.
Don't have too soft of a spot for him, Mr. Mayor, because he's a conservative. He's one of them guys, and so. But man, we appreciate the time. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Growing up Isotope Dukes, were you disappointed that you weren't going to be able to? Dodgers were looking forward to this year more than the last quarter of a century. Were you a Dodger fan growing up?
Oddly, I kind of, everyone, of course, in New Mexico is a big Dodgers. Most people, big Dodgers fans, and same with Cowboys and Broncos. I was the third son, and so I was a rebel. So I didn't like any of those teams. I love the A's because I love the Bash Brothers.
There you go. Well, you're represented here in our studio. There's a couple of big pictures of you here. We're honored that you agreed to come on the podcast, and keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Mayor. We are behind you, not 1,000%. We're behind you 1,000,000%. Keep doing what you're doing. You're just like the quarterback. The quarterback don't hear the naysayers. Keep it going.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Coach B, for all you've done for our community. And, of course, those 2 awesome rings you brought to Duke City. And look forward to being on again soon. And really proud that you guys are still doing this right now for all of us sitting at home and on the Internet. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bye-bye.
Well, as you doing what you're doing, Mr. Mayor, we are behind you, not 1,000%. We're behind you. As usual, you tried to steal the thunder.
That's not true. I love the mayor's sports teams, man. Oh. The Bad Boys, the Bash Brother A's. I want to have a beer with that guy. He's got the coolest sports teams.
He really does. But one of the things that I love about him is passion for the community. Mm-hmm. He has a passion. He's who's got a tougher job in the city right now, other than if you outside of a hospital. Who's got a tougher job? If you read social media, if you do any of those things, you see him getting killed.
Oh yeah.
And no matter what.
That's why I asked that golf question. Because it's what other time of the year, right? Other than right now, is City Hall probably getting 500 questions about golf, all of them being complaints.
And that's the reason why they have that term Monday morning quarterbacks, because everybody can be a quarterback on Monday morning, but they couldn't play, they couldn't break the huddle, but yet they're going to be a Monday morning quarterback. And that's the thing where I think he does a good job. He reminds me, he was a quarterback for me, but he reminds me of, he just lets things slip off his back, man. He just like a duck. He lets it slip off his back, and he goes about doing the best job that he can.
And what an incredibly informative conversation that was. He was we took him everywhere with our questions, and I thought it was really informative for the general public, whether it was about youth sports, what goes into making these big decisions. He was able to kind of educate on all of that.
Yeah, and I think you should kind of apologize. You should thank me a little bit for not, getting on you when Mr. Mayor was on, because I could have threw you under the bus many times during that interview.
It hurts me as a conservative how much I like the mayor.
Well, you do say. What do you say about him?
My friend the mayor.
Your friend the mayor, and so.
But he's doing a great job for the city.
Let's give a shout out to our, we have a producer now. Let's give a shout out to a producer.
I know you don't have a budget, it's all gone to your pregame meal.
So it's vouchers, old vouchers.
These say gladiators; those aren't around anymore.
Are they still in business? I think that man, and for him to give us 45 minutes and we made him wait 15, he'd have gave us an hour for crying out loud.